My name is Lisa Carter, and I live in Austin, Texas. For the past 5 years, I've been married to Henry, a man I thought I'd spend my life building a home and family with. But life has a way of unraveling expectations, doesn't it? I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, raised by parents who taught me the importance of kindness and self-respect. They weren't wealthy, but they were rich in love and values, and that shaped the woman I am today. When I met Henry, he swept me off my feet with his charm and promises of a shared dream. I thought I was marrying into love, but instead, I married into his family, more specifically, into his sister, Emily's unrelenting disdain. From the moment I met Emily, I could sense she didn't like me. She was cold, dismissive, and quick to undermine me at every turn. It was little things at first, snide comments about my cooking, subtle digs about my upbringing, but they piled up. And Henry? He always brushed it off. "That's just Emily," he'd say, as if that excused her behavior. Emily had this way of making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. She and Henry shared a bond that I couldn't compete with. She was his big sister, the one who had practically raised him after their parents passed away. I respected that history, but I couldn't understand why it meant my feelings had to take a backseat. I tried to keep the peace for Henry's sake. I bit my tongue, smiled through the hurt, and convinced myself that things would get better. But deep down, I knew the problem wasn't just Emily. It was Henry's unwillingness to stand up for me. And that realization, it started to chip away at the foundation of our marriage. It all came to a head one evening, about 7 months into my pregnancy. I was already exhausted, dealing with the aches and discomforts that come with carrying a child. But I was also quietly excited. I'd spent the week organizing the nursery, folding tiny clothes, and imagining the life I wanted for my baby, a life full of love, respect, and stability. Then came the knock at the door. Emily. She stood there with her 3 kids, each of them lugging backpacks, pillows, and blankets. The look on her face wasn't apologetic or uncertain. It was entitled, as if it was already decided that she and her children would be staying with us. "Henry said it's fine," she announced, rushing past me before I could even greet her. Fine? This was the first I'd heard of it. But before I could question her, Henry appeared behind her, grinning like this was some kind of reunion. "She just needs a place to stay for a little while," he said casually, like it was no big deal. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Our home wasn't big to begin with, and my pregnancy had already made space feel tighter. I wasn't ready to host anyone, let alone someone who openly despised me and her 3 energetic kids. Emily wasted no time taking over. She marched straight into the guest room, which I had temporarily been using as my own room to get better rest during the pregnancy. Between Henry's late-night work calls and my constant need to toss and turn, sleeping separately had been an unspoken agreement. But now, Emily dumped her things on my bed like it was her own, her kids running around the house, already making a mess. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked Henry quietly, trying to keep my voice calm despite the anger boiling inside me. He sighed, almost annoyed that I even asked. "It's just for a couple of days, Lisa. You can sleep on the balcony. It's nice out, and it's better than making them uncomfortable." I froze. The balcony? He wanted his pregnant wife to sleep on the balcony in the middle of December, while his sister and her kids took over my space. I stared at him, hoping, praying that he would realize how absurd and hurtful his suggestion was. But he didn't. "Emily's been through a lot," he added, as if that justified everything. "And I haven't," I snapped, unable to hold back anymore. "I'm 7 months pregnant, Henry. I need rest. I need comfort. I need you to stand up for me." But he didn't. Instead, he gave me that look, the same look he always gave when Emily was involved. That mix of pity and exasperation, like I was being unreasonable for expecting even the bare minimum. And so I slept on the balcony that night. I bundled up in blankets, my breath visible in the cold air, and stared at the stars, wondering how my life had come to this. How had I allowed myself to become so invisible in my own home? The second night was worse. I could hear Emily and her kids laughing and talking inside while I shivered outside, feeling more like an intruder than a wife. That was when I realized something had to change. On the 3rd morning, I packed a bag. I didn't even bother explaining myself to Henry. He didn't deserve an explanation. I just told him I was leaving, and I walked out the door. For the first time in years, I chose myself. A year passed after I left, and I'd finally started to feel like myself again. At first, it had been terrifying. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, barely big enough for me and the baby I was expecting. I didn't have much, just a few pieces of furniture, my clothes, and the tiny savings I had managed to stash away during my marriage. But it was mine, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I spent those months rebuilding myself piece by piece. I went to therapy, leaned on the few friends who had stuck by me, and prepared for motherhood with a determination I didn't know I had. My daughter, Lily, was born 6 months after I left Henry, and holding her for the first time was the most grounding moment of my life. She became my world, my reason to keep moving forward. Then, one evening, when Lily was about 6 months old, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my stomach sank when I peered through the peephole. It was Henry. He looked disheveled, his hair messy, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes hollow in a way I hadn't seen before. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Liza," he said, his voice breaking, "I need your help." I stood frozen, clutching the doorframe for support. I hadn't seen him since the day I left. Part of me had expected him to fight for me, to show up and beg me to come home. But he hadn't. And now, a year later, here he was, looking desperate and defeated. "What do you want, Henry?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing nervously behind him like he was afraid someone might see him. "Emily kicked me out," he admitted. "I lost my job a few months ago and I've been staying with her, but she said I'm a burden. She told me to leave." I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The irony of it all was almost too much to bear. The sister he had always prioritized, the one he had forced me to endure, had thrown him out when he needed her most. "And what does that have to do with me?" I asked, my voice sharp. He looked at me, then really looked at me, as if he couldn't believe I wasn't immediately offering him shelter. "I need a place to stay," he said, his voice cracking. "Just for a little while, until I get back on my feet. And I want to see my daughter." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I was back on that balcony, shivering in the cold while he chose his sister over me. I thought of all the nights I cried myself to sleep, pregnant and alone, wondering why I wasn't enough for him. And now he was here, asking for my help, expecting me to open my home and my heart like nothing had happened. "Henry," I said, my voice trembling with anger, "you didn't care about me when I needed you. You let your sister treat me like garbage, and you stood by while I was pushed out of my own home. Now you want me to take you in? After everything?" He flinched, as if my words physically hurt him. "I made mistakes," he said quietly. "But I'm here now. I want to make things right." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "You don't get to waltz back into my life when it's convenient for you. I worked too hard to build a life for myself and Lily, and I won't let you tear that down." He started to say something, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "No, Henry, you need to find somewhere else to go. I can't let you stay here. And as for Lily, you'll have to prove to me that you're worthy of being in her life." The look on his face was heartbreaking, but I didn't let it sway me. For the first time in our relationship, I put myself first. I closed the door and locked it, leaning against it as tears streamed down my face. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had fought too hard to protect my peace, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me, not even the man I had once loved. When Henry showed up again 2 weeks later, I was prepared. I knew he'd come back. He wasn't the kind of man to let go easily when he wanted something. This time, I didn't let him inside. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me, keeping Lily safe and warm inside. He looked even worse than before. The shadows under his eyes were darker, his clothes more disheveled. He carried a small duffel bag, the kind you pack when you had nowhere to go and nothing left to lose. "Liza, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't have anywhere else to go. Emily's done with me, and I just want to be part of Lily's life. I'm her father." I crossed my arms, holding my ground. The old me, the one who had bent over backward to make him happy, who had sacrificed her dignity to keep the peace, might have caved. But that woman was gone. "You're her father?" I repeated, my voice steady but laced with anger. "Where was that father when I was pregnant, Henry? When I was sleeping on a freezing balcony while you gave my room to your sister and her kids? You didn't care about me then, and you didn't care about our baby. You let me walk out of that house without even trying to stop me." He looked down, shame written all over his face. I made mistakes, he said softly. I know I did. But I've lost everything, Lisa. I just need a chance to make things right. I took a deep breath, steadying the fire inside me. Henry, do you know what I've learned this past year? I've learned that I deserve better. I deserve respect, love, and someone who puts me first. And Lily deserves that too. She deserves a father who's reliable, who shows up, and who doesn't let her down. Right now, that's not you. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand to stop him. I'm not going to let you use me as a safety net. You had your chance, Henry, more than one. And you blew it. I worked hard to build a life for myself and Lily, and I won't let you come in and tear that apart. But where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice desperate. I shrugged, my resolve unwavering. That's not my problem. When I needed a place to sleep, you made me sleep on a balcony. At least now, you can sleep outside under the stars and think about how it feels to be unwanted. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret them. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of all his mistreatment lifting off my shoulders. Henry stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filling with tears. But I didn't let them sway me. I wasn't the same woman he had once controlled. Goodbye, Henry, I said firmly, stepping back toward the door. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be here. I closed the door and locked it, leaning against it for a moment as I listened to the sound of his footsteps retreating. A part of me felt sad, but it was overshadowed by the pride and relief that came from finally standing up for myself. I wasn't the same woman who had walked out of his house a year ago. I was stronger, smarter, and fiercely protective of the life I had built for me and my daughter. And as I walked back into the warmth of my home, Lily cooing softly in her crib, I knew I had made the right choice. As I stood there, the weight of the past year finally lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was free. I had my daughter, my peace, and my future to look forward to. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of the woman I had become.